This was a confusing-ish experience. I'm still not completely sure how I feel about this show. Disney sent me a screener for the entire season of Renegade Nell. I actually started watching it when I was in California, finished it up after I got back home. I've been very busy, so I wasn't able to finish it up in time to do a review before the series went live, because as of the recording of this, it's already live. But anyway, I wanted to get a review for this done because Renegade Nell, I went into this completely blind. I'd never heard of this. I didn't even look it up before I started. My brother did look it up, and he said that it was live action because I wasn't sure if it was animated or whatever. Yes, it's live action. There are some visual effects that happen in here because this is a story that contains supernatural-ish elements. It takes place in England in the early 1700s. It stars an actor that I've never really watched before, I don't think. If I have, I didn't know who she was. Her name is Louisa Harland. I definitely will know who she is now. And it also has other actors in here like Jolie Richardson, who was fantastic. I mean, she was really funny in here, the way she played her part. You could tell she was just savoring each snarky line that she had, and she was really funny. And also Frank Delane, who it took me a few episodes before it finally clicked in my brain who he is. So this guy, he plays oh gosh, I forgot his character's name already. But anyway, the very first time I ever saw him, he played a young Lord Voldemort. And then he played in Fear the Walking Dead, or Fear something, you know, the spinoff of The Walking Dead. He played the troubled son of the main character who was addicted to drugs. He was really good in there. And his character in here was really funny. And I have to say, I feel like he kind of helped make this show for me just because the way he played his part. And it took a bit for me to actually get into this show, and I'm not even sure that I'm fully into it. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't super in love with it. And I have a list of cons very long. A lot of those cons have to do with inconsistencies in the writing, weak writing that got under my skin. And so I just started to notice more and more and more things. A lot of them I can't really get into specifically. I don't want to get into specifically because I don't want to spoil stuff. But anyway, the premise of this is that Louisa Harland plays Nellie Jackson, and she is like this highwayman. She's like a robber, and it's never fully explained, but there's like this Billy Blind, this fairy spirit or whatever. From what I understand, it's an actual like part of English lore or whatever. I'd never heard of him before. He will he's turns into this little ball of light, and he'll go inside her, and she becomes very strong and unstoppable, supernaturally strong. So this isn't necessarily girl bossy in the way that you might think, because when he is inside her, like giving her these powers, it's not because she's so tough, it's because of these powers that she's getting from him. So, you know, whatever. But she gets caught up in this stuff, and she ends up being on the run, and something happens to her father, and then something happens to like a lord in the area, and she is accused of crimes that she did not commit. She also encounters the character played by Frank Delane, and they have these moments together where they have to work together, and it's a little comical, the situations that go on between them and the situations that they get themselves caught up in. That was part of the charm of this. But something that was really unusual about this show is that it has this weird it has this odd mishmash of different tones. Like, it was lighthearted and family friendly sometimes, but also had very dark and scary and serious moments at other times. And like, not necessarily dark and scary for me, but definitely harder than something that's just PG or pure like family-friendly Disney, because there's a character that gets shot in the head early on, like, and it shows him being shot in the head, not necessarily blood spatter, but he's shot point blank in the head. And I was thinking, what's the rating on this? And so I looked it up right before I started filming, and it's PG-13. And yes, it definitely is deserving of the PG-13 rating. There are other situations of violence that happen, but it's counterbalanced by this weird, lighthearted goofiness sometimes. It's a strange mixture. And that's why I said I can't quite figure out what I feel about this. I am not sure if there's going to be a season 2, honestly. Things kind of wrap up, but I don't know. Who the heck knows? I guess a lot of it's going to depend with how the series, how well it goes over. Something that I liked about this show was that there were unexpected occurrences. There were things that happened with certain characters that you think you have figured out how you're going to feel about them, but then there is a level of depth that is revealed about them. So things aren't quite as, black and white as you might think. A lot of characters have shades of gray to them. That's interesting. I do like when they're able to do that. Even the bad people, they demonstrate nuance to their character that I appreciated, that they weren't just cookie cutter bad guys. There was one character for sure, like one of the baddies. He was definitely cookie cutter bad guy. He was just all bad. But people that were working in his circle, there were layers to them that made them pretty interesting. Something that started off as sort of a con to me, but then it became really not a con because I started to understand the reasoning for this. So the main character, Nell, the actor eventually won me over in the role, but for the first few episodes, I just wasn't feeling it because I had even specifically written down the actor who plays Nell is not charismatic / engaging enough to carry the story. She doesn't really have a screen presence that just grabs you and makes you interested, for me, I just was like, oh, well, she doesn't look interesting enough to really pull me in as the character. She's kind of, I don't know, she doesn't have this screen presence that some other leading ladies would have. However, it became clear later on why she was given this part, because if she'd been too beautified up, she wouldn't have passed for the disguises that she had to get into in order to hide. There are several times where she has to pose as a guy. And so her face, when you look at her, she looks like someone who could convincingly pass as a guy or a girl. She's definitely a girl. And when she's dressed a certain way, it's very obvious she's a girl. Also when she talks and moves and all that stuff. But when she's in these disguises, you could see, okay, well, I could see why some people might think she's a guy. However, there were other moments when she's in these disguises where she's making no effort to even disguise her voice. So it's like, you're kind of giving yourself away. I mean, somebody'd have to be completely deaf not to notice that you don't sound at all like a guy. Like a guy. And there were also other times where she was supposed to be in disguise, but she wasn't doing much really to disguise her face. No disguising of the voice, no fake mustache or anything to try to hide that she's pretty obviously a girl if you look long enough at her. So anyway, that was kind of frustrating to see as that played out. Then there were other things that I'm kind of getting into the cons now, and I'm going to skip over pretty much most of them because a lot of them are specific to a situation, and I just won't get into that too much so you can just experience this for yourself. But one of the first things that I noticed about this was that the demographics of the area were not accurate to the time. Initially, I was wondering if this was supposed to be an alternate historical reality. You know how sometimes they'll take actual moments in history, but then they create an alternate version of it for, let's say, different anime stories or whatever. They do that, like in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. There's this alternate reality that's been created. But that wasn't really the case because they do reference actual historical, they talk about Jacobites and the queen in there was the real queen and all these different political things that were happening are directly referenced, but they're not accurate with the demographics of the area, and that becomes really obvious. And it was just like, why? I don't. So that was something that was Disney, you know how Disney is. It's not even something that becomes something that's enmeshed in the actual plot. Like, it's not something that's necessarily pointed out, except maybe once or twice with regard to one of the characters in there, which, okay, that makes sense. But that was something that kind of stood out to me as not really fitting. But that's like a complete non-issue compared to a lot of the other things that go on with the writing in this show as the story progresses. Now, in the beginning, it took me a couple episodes to really get into this. Then I did start to get into this as events are developing, things are getting pretty serious. I'm getting to know the character of Nell. She's growing on me, and I'm liking her interactions with the guy that Frank Delane plays. And so that's all well and good. I think this show is 8 episodes long. Around the 5th-ish episode, it starts to veer into areas that get a bit goofy. The writing gets weaker as the show goes on. There are silly scenarios that are inserted that were just made me roll my eyes. Of just, what? There is a musical number that happens in the 7th episode that is just cringe to me. That musical number is brought up in a later scene with a group of people, and just magically people's ideas about things change because this musical, oh my god. It's so weird because I have a lot of things wrong with this, but yet there was a charm to this show that I did appreciate. One of the silly situations that happened in here felt like it was just done for purposes of being able to throw in a female-female kiss, which was weird because these characters weren't even gay. That didn't work for me because it felt like it was something that was just set up specifically for this moment to happen, and it didn't even, you'll know what I mean when you see it. When you watch it and you know about these characters, you'll realize how kind of silly it comes across. Well, to me it was silly because it just didn't make any sense. Then there is with regard to the writing and the weakness of the writing, there are events that happen that are quite convenient. Then other things that happen that don't make sense at all, and certain scenes don't hold up because the way they were written, they just don't stand up to scrutiny. This was unfortunate because that's kind of all I can think about when I think about this show, even though there were things about it that I did like. It's weird. I don't feel like I have adequate words to explain this mixture of feelings I have about this show. If there's a season 2, will I watch it? I don't know. Maybe just because I want to see Frank Delane in here. I wish he'd been in here more often. His comedic timing is so on point. And Jolie Richardson as well. The way they played off of each other was really fun to watch. So like these side characters, like these two people, they kind of helped prop up this show a little bit more than maybe would have been possible if it weren't for their presence. If you guys decide that it's something that you want to check out, please bear in mind this does not feel like something that's suitable for very young children. There's definitely some stuff in here that earns its PG-13 rating. And like I said, it was a strange combination of different tones. It sort of works, this mishmash of tones, and yet sometimes it felt like it didn't quite work. Like I didn't know how seriously I needed to take certain events, or if it was something not to worry about because this was just a light-hearted-ish tale that was being told. I don't know, it was strange. It was different. Let's just say that. Okay, I don't think there's much more to say. Maybe if the situation arises, I'll go into a bit more detail in the comments section about some of the issues that I had. But for now, I have really nothing much more to say. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this to a close. Later, guys.